Sarah Martinez stood in the rain outside the towering glass building that housed the regional headquarters of Meridian Defense Systems. Water dripped from her soaked hair as she clutched the manila envelope containing her credentials. At 19, she looked even younger, especially with her nervous expression and the oversized blazer she had borrowed from her older sister. The security checkpoint buzzed with activity. Military personnel and government contractors moved through the scanners with practiced ease, their badges reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. Sarah approached the first checkpoint, her heart hammering against her ribs. Next, called the guard, a middle-aged man with graying temples and suspicious eyes. His nameplate read Thompson. Sarah stepped forward and handed over her identification documents. Thompson examined the ID card, his thick fingers turning it over twice. He held it up to the light, checking the holographic security features. A small chuckle escaped his lips. "Bold try, miss," he said, shaking his head. "Real cute. You think we don't see fake IDs every day?" Sarah's stomach dropped. "Sir, that's not fake. I'm Sarah Martinez, Level 7 cryptographic analyst. I was transferred here from the Denver facility yesterday." The guard's eyebrows shot up. He looked at her again, taking in her youthful appearance and nervous demeanor. "Level 7? Kid, I've been working security for 15 years. Level 7 analysts don't look like they should be asking for homework help." Other people in line began to stare. Sarah felt heat creeping up her neck. She had worked too hard to get here, spent too many sleepless nights proving herself in Denver, to be stopped by someone who judged her by her appearance. "Please check your system," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My clearance was processed through Central Command yesterday evening." Thompson sighed and turned to his computer terminal. His fingers moved slowly across the keyboard as he entered Sarah's information. The screen flickered, and his expression changed from amused dismissal to confusion, then to something approaching alarm. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. He tried the search again, this time more carefully entering each letter and number. The same result appeared on his screen. Sarah watched as the color drained from the guard's face. He picked up a secure phone and dialed an extension. "This is Thompson at Gate 3, he said quietly. "I need immediate verification on a Level 7 clearance." "Yeah, I'll wait." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Sarah could feel the eyes of everyone in line boring into her back. A businessman in an expensive suit tapped his foot impatiently. A woman in military uniform checked her watch and frowned. Thompson hung up the phone and looked at Sarah with new eyes. "They're running additional verification," he said, his tone now respectful but wary. "Please step aside and wait." Minutes crawled by like hours. Sarah stood to the side of the checkpoint, watching as other personnel moved through the scanners. Some glanced at her with curiosity, others with suspicion. She began to doubt herself. Maybe there had been an error in the transfer. Maybe her clearance hadn't gone through properly. The phone rang. Thompson answered it immediately. "Thompson here." He listened intently, occasionally glancing at Sarah. "Yes, sir." "Understood, sir." "Right away, sir." When he hung up, his entire demeanor had changed. He stood straighter, and when he looked at Sarah, there was something like respect in his eyes. "Miss Martinez," he said formally, "I apologize for the delay. Your credentials have been verified at the highest levels." Sarah felt relief flood through her, but Thompson wasn't finished. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I've been instructed to escort you personally to command level." That's not normal procedure, Mississippi." Command level. Sarah had heard whispers about in Denver. It was where the real decisions were made, where projects so classified that even talking about their existence could end careers. She had never expected to set foot there, especially not on her first day. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Thompson shook his head slowly. "No problem. But in 15 years, I've never seen anyone your age with clearance for command level. And I've definitely never been told to bring someone up there personally." He gestured for her to follow him. They walked past the regular elevators to a separate bank that required additional card access. Thompson swiped his badge and then gestured for Sarah to do the same. The elevator doors opened silently. As they rose through the building, Thompson studied her reflection in the polished steel doors. Mind if I ask what you did to get their attention? Level 7 at your age. That's not just impressive, it's unprecedented. Sarah thought about the late nights in Denver, the encryption algorithms she had cracked that others had deemed impossible, the security vulnerabilities she had identified in systems that everyone else thought were impenetrable. She thought about the commendation that had come from Washington, the one that had apparently fast-tracked her transfer. "I just did my job," she said quietly. The elevator continued its ascent, carrying her toward a floor she had never imagined reaching, toward answers to questions she didn't even know she should be asking. The elevator doors opened with a soft whisper onto a floor that looked nothing like the rest of the building. Instead of the sterile government office environment Sarah expected, command level resembled something from a high-tech thriller. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, and sophisticated monitoring equipment hummed quietly in alcoves. Security cameras tracked their movement with subtle mechanical precision. Thompson led her down a carpeted hallway where their footsteps made no sound. Portrait photographs of military leaders and government officials lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow Sarah as she passed. She recognized some faces from news broadcasts, others from classified briefings in Denver. "Through here," Thompson said, stopping before an unmarked door. He knocked twice, paused, then knocked 3 more times in a specific pattern. The door opened immediately. A tall woman in her 50s stood in the doorway. She wore a crisp navy suit and had the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her blue eyes assessed Sarah with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Miss Martinez," the woman said. Her voice carried authority that made Sarah automatically stand straighter. "I'm Director Catherine Walsh." "Thank you, Thompson. I'll take it from here." Thompson nodded and retreated, leaving Sarah alone with the director. Walsh gestured for her to enter the office, which was surprisingly spacious and filled with natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city below. "Please sit," Walsh said, indicating a leather chair positioned in front of an imposing mahogany desk. The desk surface was almost empty except for a single manila folder and a secure telephone with multiple colored buttons. Sarah took the offered seat, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Walsh settled behind the desk and opened the folder. Sarah caught a glimpse of her own photograph clipped to what appeared to be a comprehensive dossier. 19 years old, Walsh began, reading from the file. Graduated summa cum laude from MIT at 17 with dual degrees in computer science and mathematics. Top of your class at the National Cryptographic Training Center. 8 months in Denver, where you identified critical vulnerabilities in 3 supposedly secure systems. Walsh looked up. Impressive resume for someone who can't legally drink alcohol. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, unsure what else to say. Walsh closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. "Tell me about the Henderson Protocol." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Henderson Protocol was the most classified project she had worked on in Denver. Only 5 people in the entire facility had been cleared to know about its existence. The fact that Walsh knew about it meant she operated at security levels Sarah couldn't even imagine. "I can't discuss that without proper authorization, ma'am," Sarah said carefully. A smile played at the corners of Walsh's mouth. "Good answer, but I'm giving you that authorization now. Tell me what you found." Sarah took a deep breath. The protocol had a fundamental flaw in its encryption matrix. The randomization algorithm wasn't truly random. Given enough computational power and time, someone could predict the key sequences. And you discovered this how? "I noticed patterns in the output that shouldn't have been there. Mathematical sequences that repeated with subtle regularity. It took me 3 weeks of analysis to confirm my suspicions." Walsh nodded slowly. "Your report recommended scrapping the entire protocol and starting over. Do you understand what that meant?" Sarah had wondered about that. The Henderson Protocol had been in development for 2 years and had cost millions of dollars. Her recommendation to abandon it had not made her popular with certain people in the Denver facility. I understood it would be expensive, Sarah said. But a compromised encryption system is worse than no encryption system at all. Expensive is one way to put it, Walsh said dryly. Your discovery prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. The protocol was scheduled to be implemented across all our overseas communications networks next month. The weight of that statement settled over Sarah. If she hadn't caught the flaw, critical government communications worldwide could have been vulnerable to enemy interception. The implications were staggering. Which brings me to why you're here, Walsh continued. We have a situation that requires your particular skills. Something that demands someone who can see patterns others miss. Someone who isn't locked into conventional thinking. Walsh stood and walked to the windows, gazing out at the city below. 3 days ago, our monitoring stations detected unusual activity in the global communications grid. Patterns that don't make sense according to any known protocols or technologies. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. What kind of patterns? Data flows that appear random, but contain mathematical structures too complex to be accidental. Transmission frequencies that shift according to algorithms we can't identify. It's as if someone has developed an entirely new form of encrypted communication. Walsh turned back to face Sarah. Our best cryptographers have been working around the clock. Teams with decades of experience, access to the most advanced computers in the world. They're baffled. The silence stretched between them. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. You want me to look at it, she said. I want you to crack it, Walsh replied. Because if we can't figure out who's using this technology and what they're saying, we're flying blind in a world where information is everything. Walsh returned to her desk and pressed one of the colored buttons on the secure phone. Within seconds, the door opened and a young man in a military uniform entered. Lieutenant Morrison will escort you to your new workspace, Walsh said. Everything you need has been prepared. Your security clearance has been upgraded to Level 9. Level 9. Sarah had never even heard of security clearances that high. In Denver, Level 7 had been the highest anyone discussed openly. As Sarah stood to leave, Walsh's voice stopped her at the door. Miss Martinez? The people whose communications we're trying to intercept, we believe they may not be from any government we recognize. Lieutenant Morrison led Sarah deeper into command level, through corridors she hadn't seen before. The environment became increasingly high-tech as they walked. Biometric scanners required both fingerprint and retinal identification. The walls displayed scrolling data feeds in languages Sarah couldn't identify, and the air hummed with the sound of powerful computers processing vast amounts of information. This is your workspace, Morrison said, stopping before a door marked only with the number 7734. He placed his palm on a scanner, waited for Sarah to do the same, and the door slid open silently. The room beyond took Sarah's breath away. Banks of monitors covered 3 walls from floor to ceiling, each displaying different streams of data. The 4th wall was a massive projection screen currently showing what appeared to be a real-time map of global communication networks. Fiber optic cables snaked across continents like glowing arteries, pulsing with data flows that shifted and changed in mesmerizing patterns. The previous team cleared out an hour ago, Morrison explained. All their work files are in the system under the designation Project Lighthouse. Your access codes are already programmed. Sarah approached the central workstation, where multiple keyboards and control interfaces awaited her. The setup was more sophisticated than anything she had used in Denver. She could access computing power that rivaled national research laboratories. After Morrison left, Sarah settled into the ergonomic chair and activated the main display. Project Lighthouse files materialized on the screen, showing 3 days of intensive analysis by teams of experts. She scrolled through their work, absorbing their findings and, more importantly, their failures. The mysterious transmissions had first been detected by a listening station in Alaska. Initially dismissed as atmospheric interference, the signals had been flagged by an automated system that recognized mathematical structures within apparent noise. Similar signals were subsequently identified at monitoring stations across 6 continents. Sarah pulled up the raw data files and immediately understood why the previous teams had struggled. The transmissions didn't follow any conventional patterns. They weren't using traditional radio frequencies or satellite links. Instead, they seemed to be riding existing communication networks like ghosts, leaving only the faintest digital footprints. She spent the first hour simply observing, letting the data wash over her consciousness without trying to force understanding. This was her method, absorbing patterns before attempting analysis. The monitors around her displayed frequency analyses, signal strength measurements, and transmission timing data. Something nagged at her attention. The timing wasn't random. While the content appeared meaningless, the intervals between transmissions followed a subtle rhythm. Sarah isolated the timing data and fed it into a pattern recognition algorithm. The result made her sit back in surprise. The transmission intervals matched the mathematical sequence known as the Fibonacci series, but with variations that suggested intentional modification. Someone was embedding additional information in the timing itself. She worked through the afternoon, following this discovery down increasingly complex analytical paths. The modified Fibonacci pattern led to other mathematical structures hidden within the transmissions. Prime number sequences, fractal geometries, algorithmic progressions that existed at the cutting edge of theoretical mathematics. By evening, Sarah had made a disturbing discovery. The mathematical structures weren't just sophisticated, they were beyond current human understanding in several key areas. The algorithms being used required computational approaches that hadn't been developed by any known research institution. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the evidence on her screens. Either someone had made revolutionary breakthroughs in multiple fields of mathematics and computer science without publishing their discoveries, or the transmissions were coming from a source with technological capabilities that exceeded anything in the known world. Her secure phone rang. "Miss Martinez? This is Director Walsh. How are you progressing?" "Director, I've found mathematical patterns in the transmissions, but they're using algorithmic approaches that shouldn't exist yet." A pause. Elaborate. Sarah chose her words carefully. The encryption methods appear to be based on mathematical principles that are theoretical at best in our current understanding. It's like finding a car engine designed by someone who discovered principles of combustion that our physics hasn't reached yet. Are you saying the transmissions are more advanced than our technology? I'm saying whoever is sending them has knowledge of mathematics and computer science that's significantly ahead of anything I've encountered. Another pause. I'm coming down to your workspace. Don't discuss this with anyone else. 20 minutes later, Walsh arrived with 2 other officials Sarah didn't recognize. One was a stern-faced man in military uniform whose chest displayed ribbons indicating high-level intelligence work. The other was a woman in civilian clothes who carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to handling secrets. "Show us what you found," Walsh said without preamble. Sarah walked them through her analysis, displaying the mathematical structures on the main projection screen. She demonstrated how the transmission timing revealed hidden information layers and explained why the algorithmic approaches being used were beyond current technological capabilities. The military officer studied the data with obvious expertise. "Miss Martinez, in your opinion, what level of technological advancement would be required to develop these transmission methods?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Based on the mathematical complexity I'm seeing, I would estimate they're operating with computational and cryptographic capabilities that are at least 15 to 20 years ahead of our current level." The civilian woman spoke for the first time. "Could this technology have been developed in secret by a foreign government?" "Theoretically possible," Sarah replied, "but it would require breakthroughs in multiple fields simultaneously. The probability of achieving this level of advancement without any prior indicators is extremely low." Walsh exchanged glances with her companions. "Miss Martinez, we need you to continue your analysis, but with a new focus. We want you to attempt to decode the actual content of the transmissions. That could take weeks or months, Sarah warned. The encryption is unlike anything I've seen. You have whatever time you need, the military officer said, and whatever resources you require. As the three officials prepare to leave, Walsh turned back to Sarah. One more thing. Your work on this project is now classified at the highest levels. You're not to discuss it with anyone outside this room without direct authorization from me personally. After they left, Sarah sat alone in the high-tech workspace, surrounded by monitors displaying data that challenged everything she thought she knew about the current state of technology. She had been brought here because of her ability to see patterns others missed, but the patterns she was finding suggested possibilities that were both fascinating and deeply troubling. She activated a new analysis program and began the painstaking work of attempting to decode messages from a source that appeared to be operating with technology that shouldn't exist. Sarah had been working for 18 hours straight when the breakthrough came. Empty coffee cups littered her workspace, and the fluorescent lights seemed to burn her tired eyes. The monitors around her displayed thousands of lines of code and mathematical analyses that she had generated in her attempts to crack the mysterious transmissions. She had tried every conventional approach to cryptanalysis, then moved on to experimental methods that pushed the boundaries of accepted practice. Nothing worked. The transmissions remained stubbornly encrypted, their secrets locked behind mathematical barriers that seemed impossibly sophisticated. It was while reviewing her notes on the Fibonacci timing patterns that inspiration struck. She had been thinking about the problem backwards. Instead of trying to crack the encryption, what if she focused on understanding the underlying communication protocol itself? Sarah pulled up the raw transmission data and began analyzing it from a completely different angle. Rather than looking at the mathematical structures as encryption keys, she started examining them as a form of language syntax. The patterns weren't just hiding information. They were a fundamental part of how the information was being expressed. She created a new analytical framework based on linguistic principles rather than traditional cryptographic approaches. The results were immediately promising. The mathematical sequences began to reveal structural similarities to grammar patterns, with certain algorithmic progressions functioning like verbs and others like nouns. By dawn, Sarah had constructed a preliminary translation matrix. It was rough and incomplete, but for the first time she was seeing glimpses of actual meaning within the transmissions. The content appeared to be coordinate data, technical specifications, and what looked like scheduling information. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Director Walsh enter the workspace until the woman cleared her throat. "Miss Martinez, have you slept at all?" Sarah looked up, blinking in the harsh fluorescent light. "I think I found something important. The transmissions aren't just encrypted communications. They're using an entirely different paradigm for organizing and expressing information." Walsh moved closer to the main display, where Sarah had mapped out her linguistic analysis. "Explain." "Imagine if mathematics itself was a spoken language," Sarah began, her exhaustion temporarily forgotten in her excitement. "These transmissions are using mathematical relationships the way we use grammar and syntax. They're not encoding human language. They're speaking in pure mathematical concepts." She demonstrated her translation matrix, showing how certain algorithmic sequences correlated with spatial coordinates and how frequency modulations appeared to indicate temporal relationships. "According to this analysis," Sarah continued, "the transmissions are discussing physical locations and time schedules. But the locations..." She paused, double-checking her calculations. "The coordinates don't correspond to any places on Earth." Walsh studied the data with intense concentration. "You're certain about this?" "As certain as I can be with a preliminary analysis. The mathematical framework is self-consistent, and when I apply the translation matrix to different transmission samples, I get coherent results. But the geographic coordinates place these locations in empty space hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth. The implications hung in the air between them." Sarah could see Walsh processing the information, weighing possibilities that neither of them wanted to voice directly. "Continue your analysis," Walsh said finally. I need to brief my superiors on this development. Over the next few hours, Sarah refined her translation matrix and expanded her analysis to include transmissions from the previous week. The pattern that emerged was both fascinating and unsettling. The communications described a complex operation involving multiple locations in space, with precise timing requirements and detailed technical specifications. Most troubling was what appeared to be reference to Earth itself. The transmissions included coordinate sets that clearly identified major population centers, military installations, and communication networks. Someone or something was conducting detailed surveillance of human civilization. Sarah was deep in analysis when her secure phone rang. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Chun," said an unfamiliar voice. "Director Walsh asked me to consult on your findings. I'm coming to your workspace." Dr. Chun arrived 30 minutes later. She was a petite woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her credentials were immediately apparent from the way she assessed Sarah's work. She understood both the mathematical complexity and the implications of the discovery. "This linguistic approach is brilliant," Dr. Chin said after reviewing Sarah's analysis. "I've been working in xenolinguistics for 12 years, and this is exactly the kind of paradigm shift we theorized might be necessary for non-human communication." Xenolinguistics, the study of hypothetical alien languages. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the full implications of Dr. Chin's presence became clear. "You think these transmissions are from an extraterrestrial source," Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Dr. Chin nodded gravely. "The mathematical sophistication, the non-terrestrial coordinates, the surveillance of human activities, all the evidence points in that direction. Your linguistic analysis has confirmed what we suspected but couldn't prove." They worked together throughout the day, refining the translation matrix and expanding the analysis to include more transmission samples. The picture that emerged was of a highly organized intelligence conducting systematic observation of Earth from multiple vantage points in space. The transmissions discussed human technological capabilities with clinical detachment, cataloging military assets, and communication networks with disturbing precision. Most concerning were repeated references to something called the approach protocol, with specific timing requirements tied to the positions of celestial bodies. "They're planning something," Dr. Chin said quietly as she reviewed the latest translations. The timing references suggest a coordinated event scheduled for a specific astronomical alignment. Sarah checked the celestial mechanics data. Based on the planetary positions mentioned in the transmissions, the alignment they're referencing will occur in approximately 6 weeks. Dr. Chin's expression grew troubled. "Whatever they're planning, we have 6 weeks to prepare for it." As evening approached, Director Walsh returned with the same military officer and civilian woman for the previous day. They listened intently as Sarah and Dr. Chun presented their findings, explaining the linguistic breakthrough and the implications of the decoded content. "You're certain these transmissions are of extraterrestrial origin?" the military officer asked. "The evidence is overwhelming," Dr. Chin replied. "The mathematical sophistication, the non-terrestrial coordinate references, the systematic surveillance of human civilization. There's no plausible terrestrial explanation for these communications." The civilian woman leaned forward. "And you believe they're planning some kind of action in 6 weeks?" "The timing references are unambiguous," Sarah confirmed. "They're coordinating activities around a specific astronomical event. The level of detail in their surveillance suggests whatever they're planning requires precise knowledge of our capabilities." Walsh exchanged meaningful glances with her companions. "Miss Martinez, Dr. Chun, your work on this project has just become the highest priority for national security. We're activating emergency protocols." As the officials left to brief their superiors, Sarah sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had discovered. What had started as an interesting cryptographic puzzle had become evidence of the most significant event in human history. The universe, it seemed, was more crowded than anyone had imagined, and Earth was about to receive visitors who had been watching from the shadows for far longer than was comfortable to contemplate. The next 3 weeks transformed Sarah's workspace into the nerve center of the most classified operation in human history. The room had been expanded to accommodate additional personnel and equipment. Banks of new computers hummed quietly along the walls, processing streams of data from monitoring stations worldwide. Maps displaying real-time global surveillance coverage replaced the simple projection screen she had started with. Sarah found herself at the center of a hurricane of activity that included officials from every major government agency, military leaders from allied nations, and scientists representing disciplines she had never heard of. Her linguistic breakthrough had opened doors to understanding that revealed the full scope of what humanity was facing. Dr. Chun had become her closest collaborator, working alongside her to refine the translation matrix and decode increasingly complex transmissions. What they discovered painted a picture of an extraterrestrial intelligence that had been observing Earth for decades, possibly longer. The surveillance has been systematic and comprehensive, Dr. Chun explained to a briefing room full of officials on a Tuesday morning. They have detailed knowledge of our military capabilities, communication networks, population centers, and technological development. This isn't casual observation, it's preparation. General Harrison, the stern-faced military officer who had become a regular presence in Sarah's workspace, studied the translated transmissions with obvious concern. What kind of preparation? Sarah activated the main display, showing the decoded communications from the previous week. The transmissions discuss something they call integration protocols. Based on the context, it appears to refer to procedures for making contact with human civilization. Contact. The question came from Director Walsh, who had barely left command level since the discovery. Not invasion, Dr. Chen clarified quickly. The mathematical language they use suggests a structured approach to communication rather than conflict. They appear to be planning formal contact under specific conditions. Sarah pulled up another set of translations. They've been monitoring our communication networks to understand our languages and cultural patterns. Recent transmissions include references to human linguistic structures and social behaviors. Admiral Torres, representing the Joint Chiefs of Staff, leaned forward. You're saying they're learning about us before making contact? More than that, Sarah replied. They're preparing communication protocols designed to minimize cultural shock and misunderstanding. The level of preparation suggests they understand the psychological impact their presence could have on human civilization. The briefing continued for hours as Sarah and Dr. Chen walked the officials through every aspect of their analysis. The picture that emerged was of an intelligence that was technologically superior, but apparently benevolent in its intentions toward humanity. The extraterrestrial communications discussed Earth with what appeared to be scientific curiosity rather than hostile intent. They analyzed human achievements in mathematics, science, and engineering with what the linguistic analysis suggested was approval and respect. They seem particularly interested in our problem-solving abilities, Dr. Chen noted. Multiple transmissions reference human innovation and adaptability in positive terms. Over the following days, the team expanded their analysis to include older communication intercepts that had been dismissed as noise or equipment malfunctions. Using the new translation matrix, Sarah discovered that the extraterrestrial intelligence had been attempting increasingly sophisticated communication attempts for over 5 years. They've been trying to establish contact gradually, she realized during a late-night analysis session. The mathematical complexity of their transmissions has been increasing over time, as if they were testing our ability to recognize and decode their communications. The revelation changed everything. Rather than preparing for an invasion or unexpected contact, humanity was apparently being evaluated for readiness to join a larger community of intelligent beings. Sarah's role evolved from cryptanalyst to communication specialist as the team prepared humanity's response. Using her linguistic framework, they began crafting transmissions designed to demonstrate human intelligence and peaceful intentions. The first attempted communication from Earth was transmitted on a Thursday morning, using mathematical principles derived from Sarah's analysis of the extraterrestrial language patterns. The message was simple, a confirmation that humans had successfully decoded their communications and were ready for formal contact. The response came within 6 hours. Instead of complex mathematical structures, the extraterrestrial intelligence transmitted a series of prime numbers followed by the Fibonacci sequence, universal mathematical concepts that any technological civilization would recognize. "They're acknowledging our message," Dr. Chen said with excitement. "And they're simplifying their communication to match our current understanding." What followed was humanity's first real conversation with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Using mathematics as a bridge language, the two sides exchanged basic information about their respective civilizations. The extraterrestrial intelligence identified itself as representatives of what they called the coordination, a network of intelligent species that maintained peaceful cooperation across multiple star systems. They had been observing humanity's technological development and had determined that Earth civilization was approaching readiness for contact. "They've been waiting for us to develop the capability to recognize their communications," Sarah explained to yet another briefing full of officials. "Our ability to decode their transmissions was apparently a test of our technological and intellectual maturity." The astronomical alignment mentioned in the earlier transmissions wasn't a deadline for hostile action. It was a scheduled opportunity for formal first contact. The coordination used celestial mechanics as a timing system for their activities, and the approaching alignment represented an optimal moment for establishing communication across interstellar distances. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself serving as humanity's primary translator in ongoing communications with an intelligence that existed among the stars. The work was exhausting but exhilarating, representing the fulfillment of humanity's oldest dream of finding intelligent life in the universe. The young woman who had been denied entry at a security checkpoint because she looked too young to have high-level clearance had become the bridge between human civilization and the cosmos. Her ability to recognize patterns others missed had revealed that humanity was not alone and that the universe held opportunities for cooperation and understanding that exceeded the wildest dreams of science fiction. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the United Nations General Assembly, preparing to address world leaders about humanity's first contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The nervous teenager who had struggled to convince a security guard of her credentials had become the voice through which humanity would speak to the stars. The pattern recognition skills that had identified flaws in encryption systems had revealed the greatest pattern of all, that intelligence, curiosity, and the desire for understanding were not unique to Earth, but represented universal principles that connected thinking beings across the vast distances of space.